In a city where silence was a weapon and power was everything, Roman Vance ruled his empire with calculated precision until the woman he'd dismissed as invisible proved she'd been controlling everything all along. When rivals tried to use her as leverage, Alara Quinn faced an impossible choice: remain in the shadows or step into the light and risk losing everything. What followed was a high-stakes game of exposure, betrayal, and the dangerous realization that the real power had never been his to begin with. If you want to see how this story unfolds, stick with me until the end. And don't forget to hit like and comment with your city, so I can see how far this story travels. The elevator doors opened on the 47th floor with a whisper that barely disturbed the silence. Alara Quinn stepped out, her heels making no sound on the marble floor. It was 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes earlier than usual. She'd timed her arrival to avoid the overnight security rotation change, the small window when the cameras in the executive hallway cycled through their reboot sequence. Not that anyone would notice her anyway. She moved through the dim corridor like a ghost, past the empty desks of junior executives who wouldn't arrive for another 2 hours, past the conference rooms with their floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a city still draped in pre-dawn darkness. The Vance Tower stood at the center of it all, a steel monument to the kind of power that didn't need to announce itself. Roman Vance's office occupied the entire north corner. Alara's desk sat just outside, positioned at an angle that made her simultaneously invisible and omnipresent. She'd chosen the position herself 3 years ago, understanding what no one else seemed to grasp. The best place to see everything was from where everyone forgot to look. She set down her coffee, black, no sugar, in a plain ceramic mug that revealed nothing about her, and began the morning ritual. First, the system logs from overnight. Roman's private network generated data constantly, streams of encrypted communications that flowed through servers most of his organization didn't know existed. Alara knew. She'd built half of them herself. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. 3 flagged transactions from Singapore, 2 encrypted messages from contacts in Moscow that would need decoding before Roman arrived. A shipment manifest that didn't match its declared contents. She cataloged each item, cross-referenced them against the intricate web of operations she maintained in her head. Never written down, never spoken aloud. The phone on her desk rang at exactly 6:15 a.m. She let it ring twice before answering. Roman Vance's office. The voice on the other end was tight with poorly concealed panic. "I need to speak with Mr. Vance. It's urgent." "Mr. Vance arrives at 7:30, Alara said, her tone professionally neutral. "I can take a message." "This can't wait. There's been a situation in—" "I'm aware of the situation in Baltimore," Alara interrupted smoothly. "The shipment was rerouted at 3:47 a.m. Your contact will receive new coordinates within the hour. The delay will cost you 15%, not the 30 you were quoted. Mr. Vance considers the relationship valuable enough to absorb the difference." Silence on the other end. Then, "How did you—" "Is there anything else?" Alara asked. No, that's— Thank you." She hung up without ceremony and made a note in the digital file she kept on every person in Roman's network. Marcus Webb, Baltimore operations. Competent but prone to panic. Loyal, but his loyalty came from fear rather than respect. A useful distinction. The sun began to rise, painting the city in shades of amber and gold. Alara didn't watch it. She was already 3 calls ahead, smoothing over problems before they reached Roman's desk, making decisions in his name that she'd learned. Through careful observation and precise calculation, he would make himself. Most of his organization thought she was a secretary, a placeholder, the quiet woman who answered phones and managed calendars. They saw her plain clothes, her lack of makeup, her deliberate anonymity, and they dismissed her. Roman dismissed her too, in his way. She'd been furniture for so long that he'd forgotten furniture could have a function beyond filling space. That was exactly how she wanted it. At 7:28 a.m., the elevator chimed. Roman Vance stepped out, and the atmosphere changed. It always did. He didn't need to announce his presence. The air itself seemed to sharpen around him, as if reality understood it was in the presence of something more concentrated than ordinary men. He was 42, though he carried himself with the kind of timeless authority that made age irrelevant. Dark suit, perfectly tailored, dark hair touched with gray at the temples, eyes the color of winter steel that rarely revealed anything beyond calculation. He walked past Ilara's desk without looking at her. "Morning briefing," he said. "On your desk," Ilara replied. "The Singapore transactions require your personal authorization. Moscow is requesting a call at 9. Baltimore has been handled." He paused at his office door. It was the closest thing to acknowledgement she usually received. "Handled how?" "Rerouted shipment, absorbed the additional cost differential, maintained relationship integrity." "Cost?" $43,000, well within acceptable parameters for client retention. He nodded once and disappeared into his office. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Ilara returned to her screens. She had 4 hours before the next critical decision point, a meeting between Roman and a city councilman whose voting record had become problematic. She'd already prepared 3 different approaches, depending on how the conversation developed, complete with leverage points and exit strategies. The morning proceeded with mechanical precision. Calls were answered, routed, or deflected. Messages were filtered through layers of priority she'd established through years of pattern recognition. Problems were solved before they became crises. At 11 a.m., Roman's door opened. "Ilara." She looked up. He rarely used her name. Usually it was just "get me" or "handle this" or no words at all, just an expectation that she'd know what he needed before he needed it. "Yes, Mr. Vance?" "The Castellano dinner tomorrow night. My date canceled." Ilara waited. This wasn't a problem that required her solution. Roman Vance didn't lack for female companionship. Beautiful women circulated through his life with predictable regularity, models, socialites, the daughters of men who wanted his favor. They lasted a few weeks, maybe a month, before he lost interest, or they realized that dating Roman Vance meant dating a beautiful, impenetrable wall. "I need someone who can handle the environment," he continued. His tone was businesslike, as if he were discussing a personnel decision, which, Ilara realized with a cold shock, he was. Castellano's bringing his entire inner circle. It's not a social dinner, it's a negotiation disguised as one. "I can arrange for—" "No." He cut her off. "No arrangements. No hired companion who'll smile at the right times and know when to be quiet. I need someone who understands what's actually happening at that table." Ilara's fingers stilled on her keyboard. A warning bell rang somewhere in the back of her mind, quiet but insistent. "I'm sure you know several women who could—" "You," Roman said. "You'll accompany me." The words landed like a stone in still water. Ilara felt the ripples spread outward, disturbing the careful equilibrium she'd maintained for 3 years. "Mr. Vance, I don't think—" "It's not a request." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Castellano's organization has been pushing into our territory. He thinks he can pressure me into a partnership that favors him. He'll bring his lawyer, his financial advisor, probably his head of security. I'm not showing up with arm candy, I'm showing up with my strategist." "I'm your secretary," Ilara said carefully. Something flickered in Roman's expression, not quite amusement, not quite recognition. "You're whatever I need you to be. Tomorrow night, I need you to be someone who can sit at that table and help me read the room, 7 p.m. Wear something appropriate." He returned to his office before she could formulate a response. Ilara sat motionless, her mind racing through implications and consequences. For 3 years, she'd been invisible. She'd cultivated it, weaponized it. Being overlooked meant being underestimated. Being underestimated meant people spoke freely around her, made mistakes in her presence, revealed weaknesses they'd never show to someone they considered a threat. Tomorrow night, Roman Vance was going to put her in a spotlight she'd spent years avoiding. She pulled up the file on Vincent Castellano. 63 years old, third-generation organized crime with a legitimate business portfolio that served as an elegant mask for operations that ranged from money laundering to controlled substance distribution. He'd been expanding aggressively over the past 18 months, absorbing smaller operations and consolidating power. Roman's empire, he never called it that, but everyone else did, operated in the spaces between legal and illegal, between visible and invisible. He owned legitimate businesses, made legitimate money, and used that foundation to support operations that existed in shadows and silence. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant maintenance and absolute control. Castellano threatened that balance. He was old school, less refined in his approach. If he pushed too hard into Roman's territory, it would draw attention neither of them could afford. Hence the dinner, a negotiation disguised as a social gathering, where deals would be made in the pauses between courses and power would shift in the space between sentences. and Roman wanted her there. Visible. Acknowledged. The thought made something cold settle in her chest. At 6 p.m., after most of the floor had emptied out, Ilara locked her workstation and took the elevator down to the parking garage. Her car was a 5-year-old sedan that blended into traffic like she blended into rooms, unremarkable, forgettable, functional. She drove to her apartment in a neighborhood that wasn't fashionable but wasn't desperate either, the kind of place where no one asked questions or remembered faces. She'd lived there for 4 years, and she could count on one hand the number of conversations she'd had with her neighbors. Inside, the apartment reflected the same deliberate anonymity as everything else in her life. Minimal furniture, neutral colors. Nothing personal on display. The only exception was her home office, a second bedroom converted into a command center with 3 monitors, a secure server, and enough encrypted hard drives to store every piece of information she'd collected on Roman's organization. She stood in front of her closet and stared at the row of professional clothes. Grays, blacks, navy blues. Nothing that drew the eye. Nothing that invited a second look. "Wear something appropriate," Roman had said. Ilara pulled out her phone and made a call. "Marianne's Boutique," a warm voice answered. "This is Ilara Quinn. I need a dress for tomorrow evening. Something for a high-end business dinner." "Of course, what style are you thinking?" Ilara closed her eyes. "Something that makes people remember I was in the room." There was a brief pause. "I have just the thing. Can you come by in the morning?" 9 a.m. After the call ended, Ilara returned to her office and began pulling up every piece of information she had on Vincent Castellano's inner circle. If she was going to be visible, she was going to be prepared. She worked through the night, as she often did. Sleep was a luxury she'd learned to minimize. 4 hours was usually sufficient. Tonight, she'd make do with 3. By dawn, she had comprehensive profiles on everyone who would likely be at that dinner. Castellano's lawyer, Marcus Green, Yale-educated, ruthless in negotiation, with a gambling problem he thought he'd kept hidden. The financial advisor, Sarah Chen, brilliant with numbers, loyal to money rather than people. The head of security, a former military contractor named Davidson who'd been dishonorably discharged for reasons the records didn't specify, but Ilara had uncovered anyway. She knew their strengths, their weaknesses, their pressure points. She knew how to use them if necessary. At 8:45 a.m., she was standing outside Marianne's boutique when the owner unlocked the door. "Ilara, come in, come in." Marianne was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the sort of effortless style that came from decades in fashion. I pulled several options. "What's the occasion exactly?" "Business dinner, high stakes. I need to look like I belong at the table." Marianne studied her with a professional eye. "You have good bone structure. You hide it. Why?" "Preference." "Well, tonight we're changing preferences." She gestured toward the dressing room. "Try the midnight blue first. It'll bring out your eyes." Ilara had never thought much about her eyes. They were gray-green, unremarkable. She'd never thought much about any of her features. Her face was a tool, like everything else, useful for its ability to be forgotten. The midnight blue dress fit like it had been designed for her body specifically. Sleeveless, falling to just below the knee, with a neckline that was professional but not prudish. Simple, elegant, impossible to ignore. She stared at her reflection and barely recognized herself. "That's the one," Marianne said from behind her. "Shoes?" "I have black heels." "No, you need something that completes the transformation. Size 8? 7.5. Marianne returned with strappy heels that somehow managed to be both sophisticated and subtly dangerous. "These. And Ilara? Wear your hair down. No bun, no ponytail. Let people see you." Ilara bought the dress and shoes. On the way home, she stopped at a makeup counter, something she hadn't done in years, and let a cheerful saleswoman talk her through a natural but polished look. By the time she returned to her apartment, it was nearly noon. She had 7 hours before Roman picked her up. She spent 4 of them working, handling the daily operations that kept Roman's empire running smoothly. At 5 p.m., she forced herself to stop, to shower, to begin the transformation. The woman who looked back at her from the mirror at 6:45 p.m. was a stranger. The dress fit perfectly. The heels added 3 inches to her height. Her hair fell in dark waves around her shoulders. The makeup was subtle, but effective. It didn't change her face so much as sharpen it, bring it into focus. She looked like someone who belonged at a high-stakes negotiation dinner. She looked like someone Roman Vance would choose to bring. The thought was unsettling in ways she didn't want to examine. At exactly 7 p.m., her phone buzzed, a text from Roman. Downstairs. Alara grabbed her clutch. Inside, her phone, ID, lipstick, and a small recording device she'd activated before leaving, and headed down. Roman's car was a black Mercedes, elegant and understated. The driver opened the rear door. Alara slid inside, and for the first time in 3 years, Roman Vance actually looked at her. Really looked at her. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A recognition, a reassessment. She watched him process what he was seeing, watched him recalibrate. Alara, he said finally. Mr. Vance. Roman, he corrected. Tonight, it's Roman. We're not employer and employee at this dinner. We're partners. Partners. The word felt dangerous. Understood. The drive to the restaurant took 20 minutes. Roman spent it briefing her on what he knew about Castellano's current position, what he suspected the older man wanted from the negotiation. He'll push for a 50-50 split on the waterfront operations, Roman said. He'll frame it as fair, as respectful of territory. It's not. He's been hemorrhaging money on a failed expansion into Philadelphia. He needs our infrastructure to stay solvent. So we offer 30%, Alara said, with performance benchmarks that let him increase to 40 if he meets specific targets. Roman's gaze sharpened. You've been reading the financials. I always read the financials. Of course you do. There was something in his tone she couldn't quite identify. Not quite approval, but close to it. Castellano will bring his people. They'll try to read you, figure out if you're a weakness they can exploit. Let them try. The corner of Roman's mouth twitched. It might have been the beginning of a smile. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't advertise, where reservations required connections rather than money. They were led to a private room in the back, away from the handful of other diners who could afford entry. Vincent Castellano was already seated. He rose when they entered, old-fashioned manners that didn't quite match the coldness in his eyes. He was shorter than Alara expected, with silver hair and a face that had probably been handsome before decades of controlled violence had carved it into something harder. Roman, he said, extending his hand. Good to see you. Vincent. Roman's handshake was brief, professional. This is Alara Quinn, my strategic advisor. Castellano's gaze moved to Alara, and she felt the assessment. He was looking for weakness, for leverage, for any sign that she was decorative rather than functional. She met his eyes and didn't blink. Ms. Quinn, he said, I don't believe we've met. We haven't. Alara's voice was steady, professionally pleasant. I tend to work behind the scenes. Roman's secret weapon? There was a hint of mockery in the question. His well-organized weapon, Alara replied smoothly. The secret part is debatable. Castellano's lawyer chuckled. Marcus Green, exactly as his profile suggested, expensive suit, calculating eyes, the slight tension around his mouth that spoke of stress poorly managed. They sat. Dinner was served. The first course arrived with minimal conversation, the kind of polite small talk that meant nothing and revealed less. It wasn't until the second course that Castellano made his opening move. Roman, I'll be direct. We both know why we're here. The waterfront situation has become complicated. Your operations, my operations, they're overlapping in ways that aren't sustainable. I agree, Roman said, though I'd argue my operations were there first. History's less important than present reality. Castellano cut into his steak with precise movements. I'm proposing a partnership, 50-50 split. We combine resources, streamline operations, maximize profit for both organizations. Alara watched Roman's face remain perfectly neutral. She'd seen this expression before. It was the one he wore when someone was making exactly the mistake he'd anticipated. That's generous, Roman said, but I'm not convinced it's equitable. How so? My infrastructure is significantly more developed. My connections run deeper. A 50-50 split doesn't reflect the actual value each party brings to the table. Sarah Chen, Castellano's financial advisor, leaned forward. We've run the numbers. Based on current revenue streams and growth projections, 50-50 is more than fair. Alara set down her fork. May I? All eyes turned to her. She felt the weight of their attention, felt the moment crystallize into something that would define how the rest of the evening proceeded. Ms. Chen, Your projections are based on publicly available data, correct? Sarah's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Our analysis is comprehensive. I'm sure it is, but public data doesn't account for the invisible infrastructure that makes Roman's operations viable. The network of information sources, the systematic risk mitigation, the preventative problem-solving that keeps operations clean and quiet. Alara's tone remained pleasant, almost conversational. Your 50-50 proposal values visible assets while ignoring the architecture that makes those assets functional. And what would you propose? Castellano's voice had an edge now. 30%, Alara said, with performance-based escalation. You meet specific benchmarks over the next 18 months, and your stake increases to 40. You demonstrate that your organization can operate at Roman's level of precision and discretion, and we revisit terms annually. Marcus Green started to speak, but Castellano raised a hand, silencing him. That's insulting, Castellano said flatly. It's honest, Alara countered. Your Philadelphia expansion failed because your organization lacks the infrastructure to scale without drawing attention. You need what Roman's built. That's why you're here. 50-50 doesn't reflect that need. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Davidson, the head of security, shifted in his chair. Alara noticed. She noticed everything, but she didn't react. You're well informed for a strategic advisor, Castellano said. The words were measured, but there was a threat underneath them. Information is what I do. Alara met his gaze steadily. And the information says you're in a weaker position than you're pretending to be. That doesn't make you worthless as a partner. It just means the terms need to reflect reality. Roman hadn't moved. She could feel his attention on her, assessing, evaluating. Castellano leaned back in his chair. Roman, you've been holding out on me. Where did you find her? She found me, Roman said. There was something in his voice Alara had never heard before. Pride, maybe, or possessiveness. The dinner continued, but the dynamic had shifted. Castellano's people tried various approaches, charm, intimidation, logical argument, but Alara met each one with the same calm precision. She had information they didn't know she possessed. She could read the micro-expressions that betrayed their strategies before they fully formed. By the time dessert arrived, the outline of a deal had emerged. 30% stake, performance benchmarks, annual review. Castellano would maintain operational control of his current territory, but expansion into Roman's areas would require approval and would be integrated into the existing infrastructure. It wasn't what Castellano had wanted, but it was better than the alternatives. As they stood to leave, Castellano pulled Roman aside. Alara was close enough to hear. She's dangerous, Castellano said quietly. You know that, right? I'm starting to realize, Roman replied. Men like us, we collect power. But that one? She has power. Different breed entirely. Is that a warning? It's a compliment. Castellano glanced at Alara. And maybe a little bit of envy. In the car ride back, Roman was silent for the first 5 minutes. Alara waited, knowing he was processing not just the negotiation, but her role in it. Finally, you prepared profiles on everyone in that room. It wasn't a question. Yes. How detailed? Comprehensive. Financial records, personal histories, behavioral patterns, vulnerabilities. You've been doing this for how long? 3 years, since I started working for you. Roman turned to look at her fully. Why? Because information is leverage, and someone needed to be collecting it. Someone. He repeated the word like he was tasting it. Not me. You decided, on your own initiative, to build an intelligence network around my organization. Yes. Without telling me. Yes. Alara braced herself for anger, for the cold fury she'd seen Roman direct at people who overstepped or presumed too much. Instead, he laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, but genuine. 3 years, he said. You've been sitting outside my office for 3 years, and I thought you were just furniture, Alara finished. I know, that was intentional. Clearly. He was quiet for another moment. The Baltimore situation this morning. You didn't just handle it. You'd already wargamed the scenarios before the problem even developed. Correct. How many situations like that? In the past 3 years? Approximately 240 that would have reached your desk. I resolved them before they required your attention. Roman rubbed his jaw, a rare gesture of visible processing. Why? Because that's the job. No, secretary is the job. What you're doing is... He stopped, searching for the right word. Partnership, Alara said quietly. Except you didn't know you had a partner. The car pulled up to her building. The driver moved to open her door, but Roman's hand on her arm stopped her from exiting. Tomorrow, he said. 7 a.m. We're going to have a very different kind of conversation about your role in this organization. Yes, Mr. Vance. Roman, he corrected again. If we're partners, you call me Roman. Alara nodded and stepped out of the car. She walked into her building without looking back, but she could feel his eyes on her until the door closed. Upstairs, she removed the heels first, then the dress, then the makeup. She stood in front of the mirror in just her undergarments and looked at the woman reflected there. For 3 years, she'd been invisible by choice. She'd built an empire within an empire, operated in the spaces Roman Vance didn't know existed, made herself indispensable while appearing insignificant. Tonight, she'd stepped into visibility, and she'd done it knowing exactly what it would cost. Her phone buzzed, a text from a number she didn't recognize. Impressive performance tonight. We should talk. M.G. Marcus Green, Castellano's lawyer. Alara deleted the message without responding, but the cold feeling in her chest intensified. She'd been seen tonight, really seen. By Roman, yes, but also by Castellano's entire organization. She'd become visible. And in Roman Vance's world, being visible meant being vulnerable. She sat down at her computer and began updating her contingency plans. If tonight had changed the game, she needed to be ready for whatever came next. Outside her window, the city glittered in the darkness, thousands of lights marking thousands of lives. Somewhere out there, Roman Vance was probably still processing what he'd learned about her. Somewhere else, Vincent Castellano was reassessing his approach to their business relationship. And somewhere, this was the part that worried her, people who'd been in that restaurant were starting to see her as leverage. Alara pulled up her encrypted files and began to work. Sleep could wait. She had an empire to protect. And now, apparently, she had to protect it while standing in the spotlight. The morning arrived too quickly. Alara had managed 3 hours of sleep, her mind churning through scenarios and calculations even in unconsciousness. She woke at 5 a.m. to 17 new messages, none from Roman, all from numbers she recognized as part of his network. The word had spread. Roman Vance's invisible secretary wasn't invisible anymore. She ignored them all and went through her usual routine. Coffee, shower, the plain gray suit she'd worn 1,000 times before. The dress from last night hung in her closet like evidence of a crime she couldn't take back. She left it there and dressed in armor she understood. Unremarkable, forgettable, safe. Except safe was gone now. She'd traded it for visibility, and there was no putting that back in the box. The drive to Vance Tower felt different. The same route, the same traffic patterns, but Alara couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Paranoia, probably. Or maybe just the logical consequence of stepping out of shadows she'd carefully cultivated for years. She arrived at 6:30 a.m., earlier than Roman had requested. The executive floor was empty, the lights still dimmed for after-hours mode. She sat at her desk and stared at the dark screens, not turning them on yet. What exactly was she walking into? Roman had said they'd have a different conversation about her role. That could mean anything from a promotion to a termination. In his world, people who kept secrets, even useful ones, didn't always survive the revelation. The elevator chimed at 6:58 a.m. Roman stepped out, and Alara felt her pulse kick up despite her best efforts at control. He looked at her desk, at her, then at his office door. Inside. Not a request. Alara followed him in. She'd been in his office countless times, bringing files, delivering messages, cleaning up the debris of his decision-making. But she'd never sat down, never been invited to. Roman gestured to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. Sit. Arshipimi ishsoltant. She sat. He remained standing, arms crossed, studying her with an intensity that made her want to look away. She didn't. Tell me everything, he said finally. Start from the beginning. The beginning of what? Don't. His voice was flat. I've had 12 hours to think about last night. You didn't just prepare for that dinner. You've been operating an intelligence network inside my organization for 3 years without my knowledge. So start talking. How did it begin? Alara took a breath. Honesty, then. She'd already crossed the line, might as well own it. I was hired as a temporary replacement, she said. Your previous secretary quit after 2 months. The agency sent me over, told me it probably wouldn't last long because you were impossible to work for. And yet you stayed. The first week, I answered phones and filed papers, standard work, but I noticed things. Calls coming in that didn't match the official records. Money moving through accounts that weren't on any books I could access. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room. So you started digging. I started paying attention, Elara corrected. There's a difference. Your organization isn't subtle if you know what to look for. The patterns were there. I just had to map them. Roman moved to the window, his back to her. The city spread out below them, waking up in slow motion. Why? Why what? Why build this? Why spend 3 years collecting information on my entire network? What was the end game? It was the question Elara had been asking herself since 3 a.m. Initially, survival. I figured if I understood how things really worked, I could avoid stepping on landmines. But then I realized something. What? You're brilliant at strategy, at the big moves, but you're drowning in small fires. You spend half your time dealing with problems that shouldn't reach your desk. So I started putting them out before they got to you. Roman turned back to face her. And you thought I wouldn't notice? I thought you'd notice things running more smoothly. I didn't think you'd connect it to me specifically. Because you made yourself invisible. Yes, that was calculated. Everything's calculated, Roman. You taught me that. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. I didn't teach you anything. You were already operating at this level when you walked in here. I learned from watching you. Bullshit. The word was sharp but not angry. You learned from being underestimated your entire life. You weaponized it, made it a strategy instead of a weakness. Elara said nothing. He wasn't wrong. Roman sat down behind his desk, the morning light cutting across his face in hard angles. Show me. Show you what? The network, the intelligence system you built. I want to see it. Elara pulled out her phone and opened an encrypted app. A few taps brought up an interface that looked deceptively simple, just a search bar and a clean white screen. Pick a name, she said. Anyone in your organization. Marcus Webb, Baltimore. Elara typed. A profile appeared, dense with information. Financial records, communication patterns, family connections, psychological profile, risk assessment. Roman leaned forward, reading. His expression didn't change, but she watched his eyes move faster, processing. You have this on everyone? Everyone who matters, and most who don't, just in case they become relevant. How many people? 247 active profiles, another 112 peripheral contacts. Roman scrolled through Webb's file, stopping at a section marked Vulnerabilities. You flagged his panic response. He's loyal but unstable under pressure, high risk for making emotional decisions in crisis situations. Recommendation? Pair him with someone steadier, create redundancy in his operations so a single failure point doesn't cascade. You've thought about this. I think about all of it. That's the job. Roman set down the phone. Except it wasn't the job. The job was answering my phones. The job, Elara said carefully, was whatever kept this organization running. You just didn't know I'd expanded the job description. For a long moment, Roman said nothing. Then, I need you to understand something. What you've built, this network, this intelligence system, it's valuable, extremely valuable. It's also dangerous. I know. Do you? Because the moment people realize you have this kind of information, you become a target. Castellano's people already know you exist. That text you got last night from Marcus Green? That wasn't flirtation or networking. That was reconnaissance. Elara's stomach tightened. You knew about that? I have access to the car's interior security feed. I saw you check your phone, saw your expression. It wasn't hard to guess. Roman's voice was level, matter of fact. You deleted it without responding. Smart, but it won't stop them from trying other approaches. I can handle... You can't. He cut her off. Not alone. That's what you don't understand yet. You've been operating in the shadows where no one saw you as a threat. Now you're visible. Now you're leverage. The word hit harder than Elara wanted to admit. Against you. Against both of us. If someone takes you, they don't just get information. They get control of the infrastructure you built. They get access to every weakness you've cataloged. Then we shut it down. Destroy the files, go back to cut. No. Roman stood abruptly. We don't go backward. We adapt. Starting now, your role changes. You're not my secretary. You're my strategic partner. Official title, official authority, official protection. Alara's pulse hammered. Roman, that's non-negotiable. You built this. You own it. But you own it publicly now. No more hiding. People will ask questions about where I came from, about my credentials. Let them ask. You've earned this position 100 times over. He moved around the desk, standing close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. But you need to understand the risks. The people we deal with, they'll see you as either an asset to acquire or a threat to eliminate. There's no middle ground anymore. Alara stood, needing to reclaim some sense of equilibrium. And if I say no? If I want to go back to being invisible? Can you? Roman asked. Can you really put this back in the box? Castellano knows about you now. So does his entire inner circle. Word travels. By the end of the week, every major player in 3 states will know Roman Vance has a strategic advisor who reads people like books and collects secrets like currency. He was right. She knew he was right. The moment she'd spoken up at that dinner, she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. So what exactly are you proposing? She asked. Public partnership. We announce your new role this week. You move into an actual office, not a desk outside mine. You attend key meetings, handle strategic decisions openly, and you let me provide security. Security. A detail. 2 people minimum. They'll be vetted by me personally. The thought of being followed, watched, protected made Alara's skin crawl. I don't need... You do. And if you can't see that, then you're not as smart as I thought you were. The words stung. They were meant to. Alara walked to the window, putting distance between them. The city below was fully awake now, traffic flowing, people moving through their routines. Normal lives. Uncomplicated lives. I built this because I wanted control, she said quietly. Now you're asking me to give that up, to trust you to keep me safe. I'm asking you to recognize that control is an illusion. You never had it. You just thought you did because no one was looking. She turned back to face him. And now? Now we build something better, together. With your intelligence and my resources, we can do more than just survive. We can dominate. There it was, the real pitch. Not safety or partnership, power. Alara studied Roman's face, looking for the calculation behind the offer. It was there, of course. It always was. But there was something else, too. Something she couldn't quite name. What do you get out of this? She asked. Really? Roman smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. I get to stop fighting with one hand tied behind my back. I get to actually use the asset I've been ignoring for 3 years. And I get to see what you're capable of when you're not hiding. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. You're just not used to people being direct about wanting to use your skills. He wasn't wrong about that either. Before Alara could respond, Roman's desk phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and his expression hardened. We'll continue this later, he said, picking up the receiver. This is a call I've been expecting. Alara moved to leave, but Roman gestured for her to stay. He put the call on speaker. Vincent, Roman said, didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Castellano's voice filled the room, smooth and controlled. Just wanted to follow up on last night. My people have been crunching the numbers on your proposal. Alara's proposal, Roman corrected. She's the one who structured the terms. Ah, yes. The impressive Ms. Quinn. There was something in Castellano's tone that made Alara's instincts flare. I've been thinking about her quite a bit, actually. Have you? She's wasted in her current position. Someone with her skills, her insight, she could go far in this business. Roman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She's not available. Everyone's available for the right price, Roman. You know that as well as I do. Not her. Shame. I'd pay handsomely for someone who can read a room like that. My organization could benefit from her particular talents. It wasn't a job offer. It was a threat wrapped in professional courtesy. Alara stepped closer to the desk. Mr. Castellano, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but I'm quite satisfied with my current arrangement. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been doing the work of a partner while being treated like support staff. That doesn't seem fair. Fair is relative, Ilara said. What matters is the work itself, and I prefer working with people who value discretion. The pause that followed was loaded. Interesting choice of words. I choose them carefully. Another pause. Then Castellano chuckled. Roman, you've got a live one there. Treat her right, or someone else will. The line went dead. Roman killed the speaker and looked at Ilara. That was a recruitment pitch. That was a threat assessment disguised as a recruitment pitch, Ilara corrected. He's testing to see if I'm poachable. Are you? Do you really need to ask? After last night, I need to ask everything. Roman's voice was hard. Castellano's not the only one who's going to come after you now. Green's text was just the opening move. They're going to offer you money, power, protection from me if you think you need it. I don't. You might, especially when you realize what partnership with me actually costs. Ilara crossed her arms. Which is what? Everything else. There's no halfway with this. You're either all in or you're a liability I can't afford. The bluntness was almost refreshing. You're saying I have to choose between this and any semblance of a normal life. You gave up normal the day you started building intelligence files on dangerous men. You just didn't admit it to yourself. Ilara wanted to argue, but she couldn't. He was right. She'd been lying to herself, pretending she could maintain some separation between the work and her life. But the work was her life. It had been for 3 years. Fine, she said. All in, but on one condition. You're negotiating now? You respect that. So, yes, I'm negotiating. Roman leaned against his desk, arms crossed, something like respect in his expression. What's the condition? I maintain control of my intelligence network. It's mine. I built it, I run it. You get access, but you don't get ownership. That's asking for a lot of trust. Yes, it is. Ilara met his gaze steadily. You're asking me to make myself visible, to put myself at risk. In exchange, I need to know that the one thing I built, the one piece of power I actually have, stays mine. Roman considered this. The silence stretched long enough that Ilara started to wonder if she'd overplayed her hand. Agreed, he said finally. The network stays under your control, but you share everything relevant to operations. No secrets between us. No secrets between us, Ilara echoed. The words felt weighted, like she was agreeing to more than just professional transparency. Roman extended his hand. Partners, then. Ilara shook it. His grip was firm, controlled, exactly what she expected. What she didn't expect was the small shock that ran through her at the contact, the awareness of standing this close to someone she'd studied from a distance for years. She pulled her hand back and stepped away, needing space. When do we announce this? She asked. Staff meeting, Friday. That gives us 4 days to prepare the narrative and shore up your security. I don't need... Ilara! Roman's voice cut through her protest. You're not arguing about this. Security is non-negotiable. I'm assigning Davidson to your detail. Castellano's Davidson? Different Davidson. Jonathan Davidson, former Secret Service. He's been doing freelance work for high-level corporate clients. I've used him before. He's good. You already contacted him. I made the call this morning at 5 a.m. before I came in. He'll be here at noon to meet you. Ilara felt control slipping further away. You're moving very fast. Because time isn't on our side. The moment Castellano made that call, the clock started. Other people will reach out. Some will be subtle, some won't. We need you protected before someone decides you're worth taking by force. You really think... Yes, I really think... Roman's expression was grim. You have information that could destroy careers, dismantle operations, put people in prison for the rest of their lives. That makes you the most dangerous person in this building besides me. And unlike me, you don't have 20 years of established power protecting you. The weight of it settled on Ilara's shoulders. She'd known, intellectually, that her information was valuable, but she'd always thought of herself as invisible enough to stay safe. Now that invisibility was gone, and she was starting to understand what Roman had been trying to tell her, she was exposed. Okay, she said quietly. Security, a new office, public partnership. We do this your way. Not my way, our way. That's what partnership means. Before Ilara could respond, her phone buzzed. She checked it reflexively. Another unknown number. Another message. Your performance impressed more than just Castellano. We should discuss opportunities. Call me. S.C. Sarah Chen. Ilara showed the message to Roman. He read it, and his expression darkened. That's the third contact in 12 hours, he said, that we know about. Could be more I haven't seen yet. Roman pulled out his own phone and made a call. Get me Davidson, now. I don't care if he's in a meeting. Pull him out. More? Whoa. A pause. John, it's Roman Vance. The job we discussed this morning? The timeline just accelerated. I need you here in 20 minutes, not noon. Make it happen. He hung up and looked at Ilara. You're not going anywhere alone until he arrives. Stay in this office. Roman, I have work, so do it from here. Use my desk, use my computer. I'll be in the conference room handling the quarterly reviews. You stay here where I can control the access points. It should have felt patronizing. Instead, it felt like the first time someone had actually taken her safety seriously. Okay, Ilara said. Roman gathered files from his desk, his movements efficient. There's coffee in the side cabinet. Help yourself to anything you need. And Ilara? She looked up. Welcome to the visible world. It's more dangerous than you thought, isn't it? Yes, she admitted. It is. He left, and Ilara was alone in Roman Vance's office for the first time with permission to actually be there. She sat in his chair, massive, leather, designed to remind people who held power in this room, and pulled up her encrypted systems on her phone. Time to see how deep the water really was. By the time Davidson arrived 19 minutes later, Ilara had cataloged 7 additional contact attempts from various members of Castellano's organization, 2 from people she didn't recognize at all, and 1 particularly unsettling message that simply read, "You're worth more than he's paying you. No signature. No way to trace it back." Davidson was exactly what she expected from former Secret Service. Mid-40s, fit, observant eyes that cataloged everything without seeming to look directly at anything. He shook her hand with professional courtesy. Miss Quinn, I've been briefed on the situation. My job is to keep you safe while minimizing disruption to your routine. You'll barely know I'm here. I doubt that, Ilara said. He smiled slightly. Fair, but I'm good at being invisible when necessary. I understand you have some experience with that yourself. So Roman had told him. How much? What exactly did Roman tell you about me? Ilara asked. That you're a strategic advisor who's recently become a high-value target. That you're intelligent enough to understand the risks, but independent enough to resist help. And that my job is to keep you alive whether you cooperate or not. Ilara appreciated the honesty. And if I don't cooperate, then my job gets harder. But the outcome stays the same. You stay safe. I need to be able to work. I can't do that with someone hovering. I don't hover. I position. You won't notice me unless something goes wrong. And if something does go wrong? Davidson's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, a subtle readiness that spoke of training and experience. Then you get to see why Mr. Vance pays me what he does. Roman returned to the office at 2 p.m., his quarterly reviews finished. He looked at Davidson, then at Ilara. You two sorted? We have an understanding, Ilara said. Good. Davidson, she leaves this building at 6 p.m. Make sure she gets home safely. Ilara, starting tomorrow, he picks you up at your apartment and stays with you throughout the day. Where will he be exactly? Nearby, not in your office, not at your desk, but close enough to respond if needed. It was the compromise Ilara hadn't known she needed. Not suffocating, but not absent either. Okay, she said. Roman dismissed Davidson with a nod. When they were alone again, he said, You're handling this better than I expected. What did you expect? More resistance. You built your entire strategy around not being seen. This is the opposite of everything you've done for 3 years. Maybe I'm tired of hiding, Ilara said. The words surprised her, but once they were out, she realized they were true. Roman studied her. Or maybe you're starting to understand that power doesn't have to be invisible to be effective. Is that what this is? Power? What else would you call it? Ilara didn't have an answer. The rest of the day passed in a strange new rhythm. Ilara worked from her usual desk, but people who walked past did double takes. Word had spread about the Castellano dinner, about her role in it, about Roman calling her his strategic advisor. The invisibility was definitely gone. At 6 p.m., Davidson appeared at her desk. Ready, Miss Quinn? Alara, she corrected. If you're going to shadow me, we might as well skip the formality. Alara, then. My car's in the garage. The drive to her apartment was quiet. Davidson drove with the same professional competence he seemed to apply to everything else. When they arrived, he scanned the street before letting her exit the vehicle. I'll be here at 6:30 a.m., he said. That work for you? Make it 6 o'clock. I like to be early. 6 o'clock it is. Alara went upstairs, locked her door, and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the day. She'd gone from invisible to visible, from secretary to partner, from safe to exposed. And somewhere out there, people were deciding what she was worth to them. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Roman. Sleep with your phone on. If anything feels wrong, call me. Davidson's good, but he's not omniscient. She typed back. Understood. His response came immediately. You did well today. Get some rest. Tomorrow gets harder. Alara set the phone down and stared at her reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back was the same one who'd been sitting at that desk for 3 years, except she wasn't. Not anymore. Tomorrow gets harder, Roman had said. She believed him. Roman was right. Tomorrow did get harder. It started at 4:47 a.m. when Alara's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Quinn. The voice was smooth, cultured, unfamiliar. I apologize for the early hour, but I wanted to reach you before your day began. Alara sat up, adrenaline clearing the fog of sleep. Who is this? A friend, or at least someone who could be. I represent interests that would very much like to discuss a business opportunity with you. I'm not interested. You haven't heard the offer yet. I don't need to. I know where my loyalties are. A soft chuckle. Loyalty is admirable, Miss Quinn, but loyalty to Roman Vance specifically? That's just expensive. He pays you what, $80,000 a year? Maybe 90 with bonuses? For the work you actually do, you're worth 10 times that. The precision of the salary information made Alara's blood run cold. How did you get this number? The same way I know about the intelligence network you've built. The same way I know you've been running Roman's empire from behind a secretary's desk for 3 years. Information is currency, Ms. Quinn. You know that better than most. Alara's mind raced. This wasn't Castellano's people. The approach was too sophisticated, too informed. What do you want? A conversation, face to face. No pressure, no commitment. Just a discussion about what you're actually worth in the open market. And if I decline? Then you miss an opportunity, but opportunities have a way of expiring. This one is time sensitive. Because Roman Vance is about to make you very public. Once that happens, your value to certain parties decreases significantly. Right now, you're an unknown asset. After Friday's announcement, you're Roman's asset. Much less interesting. So they knew about the staff meeting. How? I'll think about it, Alara said, buying time. You have until noon today. After that, the offer changes. You'll receive a location at 11:45. Come alone or don't come at all. The line went dead. Alara sat in the darkness of her bedroom, phone still pressed to her ear, trying to slow her heartbeat. This was exactly what Roman had warned her about. She'd become valuable, and valuable things attracted attention. She called Roman. He answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. What happened? Alara relayed the conversation word for word. When she finished, the silence on the other end was loaded. They knew about the staff meeting, Roman said finally. That's a leak from inside my organization. Or they're guessing based on standard procedure. You announce major personnel changes at Friday staff meetings. It's predictable. Maybe. But the salary information, the specific details about your network, that's not guessing. What do you want me to do? Nothing. You're not going to that meeting. Roman, Alara, this is exactly the play I expected. They're testing your resolve, seeing if you can be turned. The answer is no. But if I go, we might learn who's behind this. I could wear a wire, get them talking. Absolutely not. You're not trained for field work. You're an analyst, not an operative. The dismissal stung more than it should have. I can handle myself. Against someone who called you at 4:47 a.m. with information they shouldn't have, someone who knows enough about my organization to identify a leak? No, you can't. Not yet. Not yet. The qualifier softened it slightly, but Alara still felt the frustration rising. So I just ignore it? You let me handle it. Davidson will be at your apartment early. Stay inside until he arrives. Don't answer any more unknown calls. And Alara? This is what I meant about the costs. Your independence, the freedom to make your own decisions without considering how they impact security. That's the first thing you lose. He hung up before she could argue. Alara threw her phone on the bed and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes. 48 hours. That's how long she'd been visible, and already she could feel the cage building around her. But Roman wasn't wrong. She wasn't trained for this. Her power had always come from information, from understanding systems, and people from a safe distance. Physical confrontation, real danger. That was outside her expertise. Didn't mean she had to like it. Davidson arrived at 5:30 a.m., a full half-hour early. When Alara opened the door, he was already scanning the hallway. Had a call from Mr. Vance, he said. We're moving up the security protocols. I heard. Good. From now on, I clear your apartment before you enter it, and I do a sweep every morning when I arrive. You have a problem with that? Do I have a choice? No, but I'm asking anyway because cooperation makes my job easier. Alara stepped aside to let him in. Do what you need to do. Davidson moved through her apartment with quiet efficiency, checking windows, closets, even the space under her bed. It took him less than 5 minutes. Clean, he said. You ready to go? I haven't had coffee yet. There's coffee at the office, mister. Vance wants you inside a controlled environment. Now. The loss of her morning routine felt like another small piece of autonomy stripped away, but Alara grabbed her bag and followed Davidson to his car. The drive was tense. Davidson kept checking the mirrors, taking turns that didn't quite match the direct route to Vance Tower. Alara noticed but didn't comment. You think someone's following us? She asked finally. I think someone knew enough to call you at 4:47 a.m. That means they know where you live, probably know your patterns. So yes, I'm assuming someone's watching. What? The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it sharpened her focus. She pulled out her phone and started going through the contact attempts from the past 2 days, looking for patterns. You're profiling them, Sat, Davidson said. It wasn't a question. It's what I do. Find anything useful? Maybe. Most of the messages came from known contacts, Castellano's people, their associates. But 3 came from numbers I can't trace back to anyone in the existing network, including this morning's call. Meaning there's a third party interested. Not Castellano, not anyone in Roman's current threat matrix. Someone new. Davidson's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened slightly on the wheel. That's worse. I know. They arrived at Vance Tower at 6:15 a.m. Davidson parked in the private garage and escorted Alara to the executive elevator. Roman was waiting when the doors opened on the 47th floor. Conference room, he said without preamble. Now. Alara followed him into the glass-walled space. 3 other people were already there, 2 men she recognized as part of Roman's senior security team, and a woman she'd seen around but never formally met. Alara Quinn, meet your new reality, Roman said. You know Davidson. This is Marcus Freeman, head of digital security. That's Sarah Wolf, communications director. Together, they're going to make sure you survive the next 72 hours. 72 hours until what? Until we've identified who's making the offers and neutralized the threat. After that, you'll still have security, but the immediate danger window should close. Marcus Freeman was younger than Alara expected, maybe 30, with the slightly haunted look of someone who spent too much time staring at screens. Ms. Quinn, I need access to all the devices you've used to build your intelligence network. That's not happening, Alara said immediately. It has to. If someone's got detailed information about your salary and your work, they've either hacked your systems or they've got a direct source. We need to know which. Alara looked at Roman. You promised the network stays under my control. And it will. But Marcus needs to verify security. You can supervise the entire process. Nothing gets copied, nothing gets shared. But we have to know if you've been compromised. The word compromised hit like a physical blow. Alara had been so careful, so meticulous. The idea that someone might have gotten inside her systems. Fine, she said, but I'm there for every second of it. Marcus nodded. Fair enough. We start after this meeting. Sarah Wolf spoke for the first time. Her voice was crisp, professional. Ms. Quinn, we need to discuss the narrative for Friday's announcement. The story we tell matters. It shapes how people perceive you, which influences how they approach you. What kind of narrative? The truth, mostly. You've been working behind the scenes for 3 years, handling strategic operations. Roman's promoting you to formalize the role you've already been performing. It's clean. It's simple. It doesn't invite questions about why you were invisible for so long. Except people will ask those questions anyway, Ilara said. Let them. We don't answer. We stay focused on the present and future, not the past. Sarah pulled out a tablet showing a mock-up of a press release. This is what we're distributing internally, and to key external contacts. Read it. If anything feels inaccurate, tell me now. Ilara scanned the document. It was exactly as Sarah described, straightforward, professional, boring in the best possible way. Nothing that would generate scandal or excessive interest. It's fine, she said. Good. Now, about your visibility. Starting Friday, you're going to be at every major meeting, every negotiation that requires strategic input. You need to be seen as essential, not decorative. That means speaking up, offering analysis, demonstrating value in real time. I can do that. I know you can. The Castellano dinner proved it, but you need to do it consistently. Become indispensable in public, not just in private. Roman leaned against the conference table, arms crossed. Sarah's going to coach you on presentation, not because you need help with the work, but because the performance matters. How you carry yourself, how you speak, what you wear, all of it sends messages. Ilara bristled. I'm not changing my wardrobe because you already did, Roman interrupted. The dinner. You understood that presentation mattered in that context. This is the same thing, just extended across every interaction. He wasn't wrong, but that didn't make it easier to accept. Fine. What else? Davidson spoke up. Transportation. From now on, you don't drive yourself anywhere. I handle all movement between locations. Your car stays parked until this is resolved. Another piece of independence gone. And socially, Ilara asked, am I supposed to stop having a life outside this building? The question hung in the air. Roman and Davidson exchanged a look. What life? Roman asked, not unkindly. When's the last time you went somewhere that wasn't work-related? Ilara opened her mouth to answer and realized she couldn't. 3 years of building an intelligence network, of living in the shadows, of making work her entire existence, she'd sacrificed everything else without even noticing. Point taken, she said quietly. The meeting continued for another hour, covering protocols and contingencies. By the time it ended, Ilara felt like she'd been processed through a machine that stripped away everything familiar and replaced it with something harder, shinier, more visible. Marcus Freeman led her to a secure room on the 45th floor, a windowless space filled with computer equipment. Bring up your systems, he said. Let's see what we're working with. Ilara pulled out her phone and laptop, walking Marcus through her network architecture. He didn't comment, just watched with increasing intensity. This is sophisticated, he said finally. Like, really sophisticated. Where'd you learn to build something like this? Taught myself. Online courses, trial and error, 3 years of practice. You've got better encryption than some government agencies I've worked with. And your redundancy protocols? He stopped, shaking his head. This shouldn't exist. You shouldn't have been able to build this without someone noticing. I was careful. You were invisible. There's a difference. Marcus ran a diagnostic program, watching data stream across his screen. Okay, good news and bad news. Good news, no one's hacked your systems. Your security is airtight. Bad news, that means the leak is human. Someone close to Roman's organization is feeding information to whoever called you this morning. Ilara's stomach dropped. How close? Close enough to know about Friday's staff meeting. Close enough to access financial records. That's a very short list of people. How short? Maybe 10, probably fewer. Roman needed to know. Ilara pulled out her phone, but Marcus stopped her. Not here. Not on any device. Face-to-face only, in a clean room. If we've got a leak this high up, we have to assume all communications are compromised. Even encrypted ones? Especially encrypted ones. Those draw attention. They found Roman in his office reviewing contracts. He looked up when they entered, reading their expressions immediately. How bad? No digital breach, Marcus said. The leak's human. Someone in your inner circle. Roman's face could have been carved from stone. Suspects? Anyone with access to personnel files and advanced knowledge of major announcements. I can pull a list, but you're going to know them all personally. Do it. Alara, stay here. Marcus, I want that list in 20 minutes. When they were alone, Roman moved to the window, staring out at the city. This is why I don't trust people. You trust some people. You're trusting me. Because you built something that proves your loyalty. 3 years of work, thousands of hours, and you never once used it against me. That's not loyalty bought with a salary. That's something else. What? He turned to face her. I don't know yet, but I'm starting to think it's more valuable than anything else I have. The intensity of his gaze made Alara look away. You're just realizing I'm useful. No, I'm realizing you're irreplaceable. There's a difference. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. The message was from an unknown number, noon deadline approaching. Location? Riverside Industrial Park, Building 7. Come alone. Last chance. Alara showed it to Roman, his expression darkened. They're pushing, he said, trying to force a decision before we can secure the situation. What if I go? No. Just listen. I said no, Alara, this isn't negotiable. They might reveal who they are. We could identify the player behind this. Or they could take you, torture you for information, and use everything you know to dismantle my organization. You're not going. The patronizing tone snapped something inside Alara. You don't get to make that decision for me. Actually, I do. You agreed to partnership. Partnership means I protect you even when you don't think you need it. No, partnership means we make decisions together. This is you treating me like a child who can't assess risk. Roman stepped closer, his voice dropping to something dangerous. You want to assess risk? Fine. Let's assess. You go to that meeting. Best case scenario, you gather intelligence and make it back safely. Worst case, you disappear and I spend the next week finding pieces of you scattered across the waterfront. Which outcome do you think is more likely? You're being dramatic. I'm being realistic. You're brilliant with data, with patterns, with reading people from a distance. But you've never been in a room where the only thing between you and serious harm is your ability to physically fight your way out. You haven't trained for it. You don't know how to handle it, and I'm not letting you learn on the job. Alara wanted to argue, but she couldn't. Every word he said was objectively true. So what then? We just ignore it? We let them think you're ignoring it. Meanwhile, I'm sending a team to Riverside Industrial Park to see who shows up. We identify them, we track them back to their source, and we handle it. Without me, without you in the line of fire, yes. The helplessness was suffocating. Alara had spent 3 years being in control, knowing everything, managing every variable. Now she was being sidelined in a situation that directly involved her. Marcus returned with a printed list. Roman scanned it, his expression giving nothing away. These 6 people, he said, all of them have the access needed for the leak. Alara looked at the names. She knew 4 of them personally. They were people she'd worked with, people she'd trusted. Could be more than one working together, Marcus said. Cross-referencing communication patterns might narrow it down. Do it, Roman ordered. Alara, you're staying in this building until we identify the source. No exceptions. For how long? However long it takes. It was a cage. Even if the cage was 47 floors of luxury office space, Alara felt the walls closing in. At 11:45, Alara's phone buzzed again. Building 7, dock entrance, 15 minutes. She didn't respond. Instead, she watched Roman coordinate his team through encrypted channels, sending 4 people to Riverside Park with instructions to observe and report. Noon came and went. Alara imagined someone waiting in an empty building, checking their watch, realizing she wasn't coming. What would they do? Give up? Escalate? At 12:47, Roman's phone rang. He listened, his expression hardening. Understood. Pull back. Don't engage. He hung up and looked at Alara. No one showed. The building was empty. Either they were monitoring to see if you'd come, or the whole thing was a test. A test of what? your loyalty, your decision-making, whether you can be manipulated. And I passed by not going. Or you failed by not taking the bait. Hard to know which without more information. Alara's phone buzzed one more time. Disappointing. We'll be in touch. The threat was clear even in its simplicity. The rest of the day crawled past in slow motion. Marcus worked on identifying the leak. Sarah refined the announcement for Friday. Davidson maintained his silent presence just outside Roman's office door. And Alara sat at Roman's desk, feeling more trapped than she'd ever felt in her life. At 6 p.m., Roman dismissed everyone except Davidson and Alara. "You're staying at my place tonight," he said. "Excuse me? Your apartment is compromised. They know where you live, they know your patterns. Until we've secured the leak, you're staying somewhere they can't predict. And your place is safer? My place has security, your building doesn't. Armed guards, encrypted access, surveillance that actually works. Yes, it's safer." Alara wanted to refuse on principle, but she couldn't argue with the logic. For how long? Until Friday at minimum. After the announcement, the equation changes. You'll be a known asset, which makes certain approaches less viable. But until then, you're in transition, visible enough to be valuable, not established enough to be untouchable. So I'm homeless for the next 3 days. You're protected. There's a difference. Davidson drove them to Roman's building, a converted warehouse in the financial district that had been transformed into high-end lofts. Roman's unit occupied the entire top floor. The space was surprising. Alara had expected something cold, minimalist, reflective of the man she worked for. Instead, it was warm, exposed brick, hardwood floors, comfortable furniture that looked lived in rather than staged. Books lined one wall, an actual collection rather than decorator pieces. "Guest room's through there," Roman said, pointing. "Bathroom's attached. There's a lock on the door if you want privacy." "You have a lock on your guest room door?" "I have trust issues. The lock makes guests more comfortable." It was the most human thing Alara had heard him say. She found the guest room exactly as promised, comfortable, private, with a lock that actually worked. She tested it twice. When she emerged, Roman was in the kitchen, doing something that looked suspiciously like cooking. "You cook?" Alara asked. "I heat things up. Sometimes I combine ingredients in ways that are theoretically edible. It's not cooking." "What's the meal plan?" "Pasta, probably. I make decent pasta." "You eat pasta?" "I eat most things." They worked in silence, Roman boiling water and pulling ingredients from a refrigerator that was surprisingly well stocked. Alara setting the table because she needed something to do with her hands. It felt domestic in a way that made her uncomfortable. This wasn't what partners did. This was what... She cut the thought off before it could fully form. They ate at the kitchen island, pasta with a simple marinara that was better than Roman had suggested. The silence stretched, not quite awkward, but weighted with everything they weren't saying. "Can I ask you something?" Alara said finally. "Sure." "Why didn't you notice me for 3 years? You're smart, observant, paranoid about control. How did you miss what I was doing?" Roman set down his fork, considering the question. "Honestly? Because you were exactly what I expected a secretary to be. Efficient, quiet, unremarkable. I didn't look deeper because there was no reason to. You never pushed back, never challenged, never gave me a reason to see you as anything other than functional. Until the dinner. And even then, it took me hours to process what I'd actually seen. You'd been invisible for so long that visibility didn't compute immediately. That was the plan. I know, and it was brilliant, but it also means I owe you an apology." Alara looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For 3 years of taking you for granted. For assuming you were background noise when you were actually the machinery keeping everything running. You deserved better than that." The apology landed with unexpected weight. Alara didn't know what to do with it. "You paid me for the work," she said. "I paid you a fraction of what you were worth, and never even realized it. That's not just oversight. That's exploitation, even if it was unintentional. I could have asked for more. Would I have given it to you? Before last week, would I have even considered that you were worth more? Probably not." They both knew it. "So what now, but?" Alara asked. "You're giving me a raise?" "I'm making you a full partner, equal stake in the organization, equal decision-making authority, equal profit share. Sarah's drawing up the paperwork." Alara's breath caught. That's That's not necessary. Yes, it is. You've earned it 100 times over, and strategically, it makes you harder to poach. If you own half of this, you're not just an employee someone can hire away. You're a stakeholder with everything to lose. There it was, the calculation underneath the generosity. It should have bothered her more than it did. When do I sign? After Friday's announcement. We make it official, make it public. No one can claim you're just a secretary after that. They finished dinner in silence. Alara helped clean up, and then Roman retreated to his office. Apparently, even at home, he worked until midnight. Alara locked herself in the guest room and pulled up her encrypted files on her phone. She had work to do, profiles to update, patterns to analyze. The leak investigation was ongoing, but she could contribute from here. At 11:30 p.m., her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. You made the right choice today, but choices have consequences. Watch your back, Ms. Quinn. Alara stared at the message, feeling the cage tighten another degree. She forwarded it to Roman without comment. His response came within seconds. I see it. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we find the leak. But sleep didn't come easily. Alara lay in the unfamiliar bed, in the unfamiliar room, in the apartment of a man she'd studied for 3 years without ever really knowing. And somewhere out there, someone was watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. The only question was whether she'd see them coming before they made their move. The leak was identified at 3:17 a.m. Alara woke to the sound of Roman's voice in the hallway, sharp and controlled in the way that meant someone was about to have a very bad morning. She checked her phone. Marcus had sent an encrypted message 40 minutes earlier. Found him. Conference call in 10. She threw on clothes and found Roman in his home office, laptop open, face illuminated by the screen's cold light. He looked up when she entered. Thomas Garrett, he said without preamble. My financial controller. Been with me for 8 years. Alara knew Garrett. Quiet, meticulous, exactly the kind of person who could access sensitive information without raising suspicion. How certain are we? Marcus traced communication patterns. Garrett's been in contact with an encrypted number for the past 6 weeks. The frequency increased right after the Castellano dinner. He's the only one on the suspect list with that pattern. Could be coincidence. Except the encrypted number? It pinged off a tower near Riverside Industrial Park yesterday at 11:53 a.m. Right when you were supposed to be at that meeting. Roman's voice was flat, emotionless. The anger was there, but buried under layers of control. He's been selling information to someone. We just don't know who yet. What are you going to do? Confront him this morning, before he knows we've identified him. Roman checked his watch. He gets to the office at 6:30. We'll be waiting. We? You're coming. You built the intelligence that helped find him. You should be there when we break him. The use of the word break sent a chill through Alara. She'd seen Roman negotiate, manipulate, control, but she'd never seen him deal with betrayal from inside his organization. How bad is this going to get? She asked. Roman closed the laptop. Depends on how cooperative he is, and how much he's already told them. They arrived at Vance Tower at 5:45 a.m. Davidson was already there, along with Marcus and 2 men Alara didn't recognize. Security, by the look of them. Not the corporate kind. The other kind. Garrett's phone pinged the building's network, Marcus said, pulling up tracking data on his tablet. He's in his office now. Got here 20 minutes ago. Earlier than usual, Roman observed. Definitely. His average arrival time over the past 6 months is 6:34 a.m. This is an anomaly. He knows, Alara said quietly. Or he suspects. Something spooked him. Roman nodded. Then we move now, before he can run or destroy evidence. They took the elevator to the 43rd floor where the financial department operated. Garrett's office was at the far end, a corner position that reflected his seniority. Through the glass walls, Alara could see him at his desk, fingers moving rapidly across his keyboard. Roman didn't knock. He just opened the door and walked in, the rest of them following. Garrett looked up, and Alara watched the color drain from his face. He knew. The guilt was written in every micro-expression, every involuntary movement. Thomas, Roman said, his voice conversational. Working early this morning. Yes, just catching up on some quarterly reports. At 5:47 a.m. on a Thursday, when quarterly reports aren't due until next week. Roman sat in one of the chairs across from Garrett's desk, utterly relaxed. Want to try again? Garrett's eyes darted to the door, but Davidson was blocking it, arms crossed. No escape route. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You've been in contact with an unknown party for 6 weeks. You leaked information about Ilara's salary, her role, our internal operations. Yesterday, you were near Riverside Industrial Park at the exact time someone tried to recruit her away from me. Roman's tone never changed, never rose. Somehow that made it more terrifying. So let's skip the part where you pretend ignorance and get to the part where you tell me who you're working for. Garrett's hands trembled. It wasn't supposed to. Who is paying? You. The silence stretched. Ilara watched Garrett's face cycle through denial, fear, calculation. He was weighing his options, trying to find an angle that didn't end with him destroyed. I want immunity, he said finally. Full protection, relocated identity, the works. I tell you everything, but I walk away clean. Roman laughed. It was a cold sound. You don't get to negotiate, Thomas. You betrayed me, sold information that could have gotten people killed. You think I'm going to let you walk? Then I don't talk. You can't prove anything that'll hold up legally. I'll lawyer up, drag this out. Legal? Roman leaned forward. You think I'm worried about legal? Thomas, you've worked for me for 8 years. You know what I do. You know how I handle problems. So let me be very clear about your situation. You have 2 choices. You tell me everything right now, and I let you live. Or you refuse, and I make an example out of you that'll ensure no one else in my organization ever considers betrayal again. Garrett's breathing had gone shallow. You're bluffing. You're not. You wouldn't. Roman pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me. I need a cleanup team at the Riverside location. Full disposal. He paused, listening. No, not yet, but be ready. He hung up and looked at Garrett. You have 60 seconds to start talking. Ilara felt sick. She'd known Roman was dangerous, had understood intellectually what that meant, but watching him deploy that danger against someone sitting 3 feet away was different. Okay, Garrett's voice cracked. Okay, I'll talk. Just don't name. I don't have a name, just a number, encrypted communications. They contacted me 6 weeks ago, said they knew about financial irregularities in my personal accounts, gambling debts I'd been covering up. They offered to make them disappear if I provided information. What kind of information? Initially, just operational details. Revenue streams, personnel structures, nothing that seemed critical. But after the Castellano dinner, they started asking specifically about Ilara, her background, her access level, her salary. They wanted to know everything. Roman's gaze flicked to Ilara, then back to Garrett. And you gave it to them. I didn't have a choice. They had leverage. Everyone has a choice. You made yours. What else did you tell them? About the staff meeting on Friday, about the partnership announcement. They asked if there was any way to approach her before it became official. So you set up the Riverside meeting. I gave them a location and suggested a time frame. I didn't know if she'd actually go, but you hoped she would. Because if they recruited her successfully, your debt to them would be cleared. Garrett nodded miserably. Roman stood. Marcus, pull everything from his computer. Every file, every communication. I want a complete picture of what he sent them. Already on it, Marcus said, plugging a drive into Garrett's computer. Roman looked at the 2 security men. Take him to the holding room on 37. Keep him there until I decide what to do with him. Wait. Garrett tried to stand, but one of the security men pushed him back down. You said if I talked, you'd let me live. I said I'd let you live. I didn't say anything about freedom. Roman's expression was granite. You're staying in that room until I've verified everything you've told me and confirmed you haven't held anything back. If you've been honest, maybe you get to leave this building eventually. If you've lied, you don't. Understand? They hauled Garrett out. He didn't resist. All the fight had gone out of him. When the office was empty except for Roman, Ilara, and Marcus, Roman turned to her. You okay? That was brutal. That was necessary. Betrayal in my organization gets one response. If I showed mercy, it would invite more betrayal. I know, I've never seen you like that before. Like what? Willing to actually hurt someone, to follow through on the threat. Roman studied her. Does it change things? Seeing what I'm capable of? Ilara considered lying, softening it, but they'd moved past that. It scares me a little, but I understand why you did it. Good. Because this is the world you've chosen to be visible in. It's not clean, it's not safe, and sometimes it requires violence to maintain order. Marcus cleared his throat. Hate to interrupt, but we've got a problem. Garrett's communications show he's been reporting to the same encrypted number for weeks, but there's something weird about the pattern. Weird how? The messages aren't just information dumps. They're conversational, like he's talking to someone who already knows a lot about the organization, someone who's asking targeted questions, not fishing blindly. Meaning whoever's running Garrett probably has other sources too. He's not the only leak, he's just the one we found. The implication settled over the room like a weight. How many others? Roman asked. No way to know without more data. But if I had to guess, at least 2 more, maybe 3. Roman's jaw tightened. Find them. I don't care how long it takes. Tear apart every communication log, every access record. I want every leak identified by end of day tomorrow. That's a tight timeline. Then you'd better get started. Marcus left, already pulling up data on his tablet as he walked. Alara moved to the window, looking out at the city waking up below. If there are more leaks, the Friday announcement becomes even more dangerous. We're revealing my position to the entire organization, including people who might be selling that information to whoever's trying to recruit me. I know. So what do we do? Roman joined her at the window. We move the announcement up, today, right now. We call an emergency staff meeting, make it official before anyone has time to prepare or report back to their handlers. That's risky. Everything's risky at this point. At least this way, we control the timing. Alara's phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number. Your partner just made a mistake. Garrett was useful, but not essential. We have everything we need. The offer stands. Walk away now, while you still can. She showed it to Roman, his expression darkened. They're watching in real time. Either they've got someone physically in this building, or they've hacked our security systems. Or both. Marcus, Roman called. Marcus appeared in the doorway seconds later. I need you to audit our entire security network. Cameras, access logs, everything. Someone's feeding real-time information to an outside party. On it. But boss, if they're in our systems, that means they saw us take Garrett. They know we know. Good. Let them know. Let them understand that I'm not playing defense anymore. Roman pulled out his phone and started making calls. Sarah, emergency staff meeting in 1 hour. Yes, all senior personnel. No, don't tell anyone what it's about. Just get them there. He made 3 more calls in quick succession, assembling the pieces of his response. Alara watched him work, seeing the strategic mind that had built an empire kick into high gear. You're going to war, she said quietly. I'm ending this before it gets worse. Whoever's trying to take you from me, they've made their play. Now I make mine. The hour between the call and the meeting was chaos organized into something resembling order. Sarah Wolf appeared with a revised announcement. Davidson coordinated security protocols. Marcus ran diagnostics on every system in the building, and Alara stood in Roman's office trying to process the fact that her visibility had triggered a conflict she didn't fully understand yet. At 7:30 a.m., the conference room on the 47th floor was packed with senior staff. Alara recognized most of them. These were the people who ran Roman's various operations, the lieutenants and department heads who kept the empire functioning. They were also, potentially, the people selling her out. Roman stood at the head of the table, Alara beside him. The positioning was deliberate, equal height, equal presence. Thank you for coming on short notice, Roman began. I'm making this announcement now instead of Friday because circumstances have changed. As of this morning, Alara Quinn is no longer my secretary. She's my full partner. Equal authority, equal stake in this organization, equal decision-making power. The silence was absolute. Alara watched faces carefully, cataloging reactions, surprise, confusion, calculation, and on 2 faces in particular, Karen Mitchell from operations and David Park from logistics, something that looked like alarm. Some of you are wondering why I'm making this change, Roman continued. The answer is simple. For 3 years, Alara has been running strategic operations behind the scenes. She's the reason our problem resolution rate improved by 40%. She's the reason we've avoided disasters you never even knew were developing. She's been invisible by choice, but that ends today. Questions? Karen Mitchell raised her hand. With all due respect, this seems sudden. Has Ms. Quinn been vetted for this level of responsibility? She's been doing the job for 3 years without the title or the pay. I'd say she's more than vetted. David Park spoke up. And the financial implications? A full partnership means profit sharing, equity distribution. Are none of your concern, Roman cut him off. My equity? My decisions? Anyone else? No one spoke, but Alara could feel the tension. This wasn't just an announcement, it was a challenge. Roman was forcing everyone in the room to acknowledge her authority, to accept her presence, and he was watching to see who resisted. Good, Roman said. Alara will be attending all major meetings moving forward. Her decisions carry the same weight as mine. If you have a problem with that, you can submit your resignation to HR. This meeting is adjourned. People filed out slowly, several casting glances at Alara as they left. Karen Mitchell stopped at the door, her expression carefully neutral. Congratulations, Ms. Quinn, she said. Thank you. I'm sure we'll be working together much more closely now. There was something in her tone that made Alara's instincts flare, but before she could respond, Mitchell was gone. Davidson appeared at Alara's shoulder. That one. She's wrong. You noticed it too? The way she looked at you? That wasn't surprise, that was recognition, like she'd been expecting this. Roman overheard. Add her to Marcus's investigation. I want her communication records pulled immediately. The rest of the day unfolded in a series of tense meetings and careful observations. Alara attended sessions she'd previously only heard about secondhand, budget reviews, operational planning, strategic negotiations. And in each one, she felt eyes on her, measuring, evaluating. By 4 p.m., Marcus had results. Karen Mitchell and David Park, he said, spreading data across the conference room table. Both have been in contact with the same encrypted number as Garrett. Different communication patterns, but same recipient. How long? Roman asked. Mitchell for 4 months, Park for 6 weeks. So Mitchell's the primary source, Park was recruited later. Roman's voice was cold. What have they been sending? Everything. Personnel movements, financial data, strategic plans. Mitchell has access to almost as much as you do. She's been bleeding this organization for months. Alara felt her stomach turn. Karen Mitchell was someone she'd trusted, someone she'd shared information with. The betrayal was personal in a way Garrett's hadn't been. Bring them in, Roman said. Both of them, same room. Let's see if they turn on each other. But when security went to collect them, both offices were empty. Karen Mitchell and David Park had disappeared. They ran, Davidson said. Probably the moment the staff meeting ended. Find them, Roman ordered. I don't care what it takes. They don't get to walk away from this. Marcus pulled up security footage. Last visual is Mitchell leaving the building at 9:47 a.m. Park left 10 minutes later. They haven't used their access card since. Check traffic cameras, credit card records, phone pings. They're somewhere in the city. Locate them. The search consumed the rest of the afternoon. Alara watched Roman coordinate the hunt with the same precision he applied to everything else. It was impressive and terrifying in equal measure. At 6:15 p.m., they got a hit. Karen Mitchell's credit card had been used at a hotel near the airport. She's running, Roman said. Probably has a flight booked. Davidson, get there before she can leave. But when Davidson and his team reached the hotel, Mitchell was gone. The room was empty except for a laptop sitting open on the desk. A message displayed on the screen. You're too late. We know everything, and we're just getting started. Davidson took photos and sent them back. Roman stared at the message, his expression unreadable. They wanted us to find that, Alara said. It's a taunt. It's more than that. It's a declaration. Whoever's running this operation, they're not hiding anymore. They're making it known that they've penetrated my organization and they're not afraid of the consequences. So what do we do? Roman looked at her, and for the first time since this started, she saw something like uncertainty in his eyes. We adapt. We assume everything we've built has been compromised. We rebuild from the ground up with only people we absolutely trust. That's a very short list. I know, right now it's you, me, Davidson, and Marcus. Everyone else is suspect until proven otherwise. The isolation was suffocating. Alara had spent 3 years building an intelligence network based on trust and carefully cultivated relationships. Now all of that was potentially corrupted. They're trying to destroy you from the inside, she said. Take apart the organization piece by piece until there's nothing left. That's the goal. But they're making a mistake. What mistake? They think I need the organization to have power. They don't understand that the organization is just infrastructure. The real power, the knowledge, the connections, the strategic mind, that's not something they can steal or corrupt. He looked at her when he said it, and Alara understood. He was talking about her, about what she'd built. You want to use my network, she said, as a backup system. I want to use it as our primary system. Your intelligence operation exists outside the official structure. It's not on any books, not in any files Mitchell or Park had access to. It's clean. For now, but if they know about it, do they? Garrett mentioned it, but he didn't have details. Mitchell and Park might know you've been collecting information, but they don't know the scope or the methodology. That's our advantage. Alara thought about her encrypted files, her carefully maintained profiles, her network of sources that operated in shadows even deeper than Mitchell and Park had penetrated. Roman was right. It was clean, probably the only thing in his organization that was. Okay, she said. We use it, but we do it carefully. If we expose the network trying to find these people, we lose the only advantage we have left. Agreed, so we move quietly. Use your sources to backtrack Mitchell and Park. Find out who they're working for without revealing that we're looking. It was elegant in its simplicity. Use the invisible network to find the people who thought they'd gone invisible. Alara pulled out her phone and started making calls. By 9 p.m., she had a lead. One of her sources, a bartender at a private club where high-level operators gathered, had seen David Park meeting with a man she didn't recognize. Middle-aged, expensive suit, spoke with a faint accent that might have been Eastern European. Description matches someone in my database, Alara said, pulling up a file. Dmitry Volkov. He's a fixer for international interest, brokers deals between legitimate businesses and less legitimate operations. If he's involved, this isn't just about stealing information. It's about acquisition. Acquisition of what? You. Your organization, your territory. Someone's trying to buy their way into your empire using inside information to map vulnerabilities. Roman was quiet for a long moment. Volkov works for the Zakharov family. They've been trying to expand into North American operations for years, but they've never had the infrastructure to make it viable. Until now, with your operation mapped out by Mitchell and Park, they could move in and take over without having to build from scratch. And they wanted you because I'm the one who actually runs it. They recruit me, they get the operational knowledge, and the loyalty of your network. It's more efficient than a hostile takeover. Roman stood and walked to the window. The city glittered below them, oblivious to the war being waged in the spaces between legal and criminal. They underestimated one thing, he said finally. What? You. They thought you were for sale. They thought everyone has a price. Everyone does have a price, Alara said quietly. They just didn't offer the right one. Roman turned to look at her. What would have been the right price? It was a test, but Alara didn't mind. Nothing they could offer, because what you gave me wasn't money or power. It was purpose, the work itself, the game. That's not something they can buy. The admission hung in the air between them. We're going to win this, Russ, Roman said. It wasn't a question. Yes, but it's going to cost something. But everything costs something. The question is whether we're willing to pay it. Alara thought about the past 4 days, about stepping into visibility, about giving up control, about watching Roman threaten a man who'd worked for him for 8 years, about becoming a target and accepting protection and living in someone else's space. I'm willing, she said. Are you? Roman smiled, and it was the most genuine smile she'd seen from him. I've already paid more than you know. What's a little more? Her phone buzzed. Another message, but this time from a number she recognized, her bartender source. The man Park met with? He just made another reservation. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., same location. Looks like a celebration dinner. Alara showed the message to Roman. They think they've won, he said. Let them think that. We'll be ready. No, not we, me. You're staying here where it's safe. And just like that, they were back to the same argument. Roman, this isn't negotiable, Alara. They want you specifically. Walking into that club would be walking into a trap. Or it would be an opportunity to identify everyone involved, to gather intelligence we can actually use. At the risk of losing you, the answer is no. The protectiveness should have felt patronizing. Instead, it felt like something else, something Alara wasn't ready to examine too closely. Fine, she said. You go. But you wear a wire, and I listened to every second of it. Roman considered this. Acceptable. But if things go wrong, I'll have Davidson extract you before it escalates. I'm not losing my partner on day 4. The word partner seemed to mean more than it had that morning. They spent the next hour planning the approach. Roman would attend the celebration dinner, play the role of a potential business associate, gather intelligence on who was involved and what their endgame looked like. Alara would monitor from a safe location with Davidson, ready to intervene if necessary. It was a solid plan, professional, strategic. It still felt like she was sending him into danger while she stayed behind. At midnight, Roman called it. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be long. Alara retreated to the guest room, but sleep was impossible. She kept replaying the day, Garrett's confession, Mitchell's disappearance, the realization that Roman's organization had been bleeding information for months. And underneath it all, the growing awareness that her relationship with Roman had shifted into something she didn't have a name for yet. Partners, yes, but partnership didn't explain the way her pulse kicked up when he looked at her. It didn't explain the relief she felt knowing he was just down the hall. It didn't explain why the thought of him walking into danger tomorrow made her chest tight. She was still awake at 2 a.m. when her phone buzzed. A message from Roman. Can't sleep either? No, she typed back. Come to the kitchen. I'm making terrible coffee. She found him at the counter, 2 mugs already poured. He handed her one without comment. You don't have to do this tomorrow, Alara said. We could find another way. There isn't another way. Not one that gets us answers this quickly. I don't like it. I know. But this is what the work requires. They drank coffee in silence. 2 people who'd chosen a life that didn't leave room for safety or comfort. After this is over, Roman said finally, things are going to be different. Different how? You're not going back to being invisible. And I'm not going back to pretending I can run this alone. Whatever we build next, we build it together. 50-50. No secrets. No secrets, Alara echoed. Roman set down his mug and looked at her directly. I need you to understand something. What I said about you being irreplaceable, I meant it. This isn't about the intelligence network or the strategic value. It's about you. Who you are. What you've built yourself into. The words landed with unexpected weight. Roman, I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable. I'm saying it because tomorrow I'm walking into a situation that could go sideways, and if it does, I need you to know that you mattered, that you changed things. Alara didn't trust herself to speak. They stood in the kitchen, the city sleeping around them, 2 people who'd found something they weren't looking for. Don't die tomorrow, Alara said finally. Wasn't planning on it. Good, because I'm not running this empire alone. Roman smiled. Noted. When Alara finally went back to bed at 3 a.m., she managed 2 hours of sleep. Tomorrow would tell them if they'd been smart enough, fast enough, strong enough, and whether choosing visibility over safety had been worth the price. The wire was smaller than Alara expected, barely larger than a button, clipped to the inside of Roman's collar where it would catch every word. Marcus tested it 3 times before he was satisfied. Audio's clean, he said. Range is good for about 200 yards. After that, you'll get static. Then I stay within 200 yards, Roman said, adjusting his jacket. He looked every inch the successful businessman. Expensive suit, confident posture, the kind of presence that commanded respect. Nothing about him suggested he was walking into what could be a trap. Alara sat in the surveillance van parked 2 blocks from the club, headphones on, watching Roman's vitals on a screen Marcus had set up. Heart rate steady, no signs of stress. She wished she could say the same for herself. You don't have to do this, she said into the microphone. Roman's voice came through clear. Yes, I do. We've been over this. I know, I just... Be careful. Always am. There was a pause. How do I look? Despite everything, Alara smiled. Like you own the place. Good. That's the idea. Davidson was positioned near the club's entrance, eyes scanning everyone who entered. His voice crackled through the secondary channel. Target just arrived. Volkov plus 2 associates, both armed, poorly concealed. Visual confirmation? Marcus asked. Affirmative. Eastern European, mid-40s, scar above left eyebrow. Matches the database photo. Roman's footsteps echoed as he approached the entrance. Alara watched his heart rate tick up slightly. Not panic, just readiness. The club was exactly what she'd expected from her source's description. Old money, old power, the kind of place where deals were made over cognac and cigars. Roman moved through the entrance with practiced ease, and Alara heard the maitre d' greet him. "Mr. Vance, your table is ready. Actually, I'm meeting someone. Dmitry Volkov?" "Of course, this way." Alara's hands clenched as Roman was led deeper into the club. The audio quality wavered slightly, then stabilized. "Mr. Vance?" Volkov's voice was smooth, accented exactly as the bartender had described. "I wasn't expecting you personally. I thought perhaps Ms. Mitchell would be joining us." "Ms. Mitchell is no longer in my employ," Roman said. "When I heard she'd been meeting with you, I thought I should find out why." A pause. Then Volkov laughed. "Direct. I appreciate that. Please, sit." Alara heard the sound of a chair scraping, liquid being poured. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "You've built something impressive, Mr. Vance," Volkov continued. "My associates have been studying your organization for some time. Very efficient, very profitable. We'd like to discuss a partnership." "What kind of partnership?" "The mutually beneficial kind. You have infrastructure, territory, connections. We have capital, international reach, protection from certain legal complications. Together, we could expand operations significantly. And if I'm not interested in expanding?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Then we'd have to consider other options. You see, Mr. Vance, my employers have already invested considerably in understanding your organization. That investment expects a return. Through Mitchell and Park. Among others. You've been very thoroughly mapped. Every operation, every revenue stream, every vulnerability. We know exactly how much you're worth." Roman's voice remained calm. "Knowing what something's worth and being able to take it are different things." "True, which is why we preferred the partnership approach. But you should understand we will have a presence in your territory one way or another. The only question is whether you're part of that presence or an obstacle to it." Alara's blood ran cold. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a threat dressed in business language. "Interesting proposition," Roman said. "But there's a problem with your assessment." "What's that?" "You mapped the organization I had a week ago. You don't know what I have now." Volkov's tone shifted, became more wary. Meaning I've spent the past 72 hours rebuilding from the ground up. Every system Mitchell and Park had access to? Replaced. Every operation they knew about? Restructured. Your intelligence is already outdated." "You're bluffing." "Am I? Tell me, did Mitchell mention Alara Quinn in her reports?" The silence was loaded. Alara held her breath. "The secretary," Volkov said finally. "Yes. We were told she was recently promoted. An interesting choice, hiring someone with no apparent credentials." "That's because you were looking at the wrong credentials. Alara doesn't have an MBA or a law degree. What she has is an intelligence network that makes your operation look amateur by comparison. She's been tracking every move Mitchell and Park made for months. We knew about the leak before you even approached me." "It was a lie. They'd only discovered the leak days ago. But Volkov wouldn't know that." "Then why didn't you shut it down?" Volkov asked. "Because I wanted to see who was behind it, and now I know." Alara heard movement, chairs scraping, bodies shifting. The heart rate monitor showed Roman's pulse climbing. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Vance," Volkov said, and the smooth courtesy was gone from his voice. "My employers don't take rejection well. Neither do I. So let me make this very clear. You and your Zakharov bosses, you're done in this city. I'm going to dismantle every contact you have, burn every bridge you've built, and I'm going to make sure everyone in our industry knows what happens when someone tries to steal from me." That sounds like a declaration of war. No. War implies both sides have a chance of winning. Lara's screen exploded with activity. Roman's heart rate spiked. Audio filled with the sound of multiple people moving. "Davidson, get in there now!" she shouted. Through the headphones, she heard Volkov's voice, sharp with command. "Gentlemen, I think Mr. Vance needs to understand the seriousness of his situation." "Well..." Then Roman's voice, utterly calm. "Before your friends reach for those weapons, you should know that every word of this conversation is being recorded and transmitted in real time. You threaten me, you assault me, you do anything except let me walk out of here. And that recording goes to every federal agency and every competing organization in 3 states. You'll have law enforcement and your own competitors coming for you simultaneously. Silence. You're bluffing, Volkov said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Test me. See what happens. Alara was already moving, Davidson beside her, heading for the club entrance. They burst through just as Roman emerged from the back room, completely unharmed, Volkov and his associates watching from the doorway. Roman saw her and something flickered in his expression. Relief, maybe, or vindication. We're done here, he said to Volkov. Next time you want to steal someone's empire, make sure you actually understand what you're stealing. In the van, Marcus was already uploading the recording to multiple secure servers. Got everything, he said. Crystal clear. Volkov screwed. The drive back to Roman's building was silent. Alara's hands were shaking from adrenaline, from the terror of listening to Roman walk that edge. You took a massive risk, she said finally. Calculated risk. I knew he'd either back down or escalate. If he escalated, you had the recording. Either way, we win. What if he'd just shot you? Then you would have had evidence of murder and the Zakharovs would have lost their fixer and their entire operation. They're not stupid enough to create that kind of exposure. Alara wanted to argue, but she couldn't. The logic was sound, even if the execution had been terrifying. Back at Roman's apartment, they regrouped. Marcus had already started distributing the recording through carefully selected channels. Law enforcement contacts who could be trusted to act on it. Competing organizations who would use the information to push the Zakharovs out. Volkov will be in custody by morning, Marcus predicted, and the Zakharovs will have much bigger problems than your territory. What about Mitchell and Park? Alara asked. They're in the wind. Probably left the country already. But without Volkov backing them, they're just 2 people with outdated information and no resources. Not a threat. It wasn't perfect closure, but it was closure enough. Roman dismissed Marcus and Davidson, leaving him and Alara alone in the apartment. The silence felt different now, less tense, more settled. We did it, Alara said. You did it. Your network found them. Your intelligence gave us the advantage. I just walked in and delivered the lines. That's not... You risked your life in there. For something worth protecting. Roman looked at her directly. This partnership, what we're building, that's worth the risk. The admission hung between them. I need to tell you something, Alara said, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Roman nodded. When I built that intelligence network, I told myself it was about survival, about staying safe by staying informed. But that wasn't the whole truth. I built it because I saw what you were trying to do. Create something that existed in the gray spaces, that operated with precision and intelligence instead of just brute force. And I wanted to be part of that, not as furniture or background noise, but as someone who mattered, someone who contributed. She took a breath. These past few days, being visible, being vulnerable, watching you put yourself at risk, it made me realize something. I didn't just want to be part of what you built. I wanted to be your equal in building it. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being about the work and started being about you. Roman's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. I'm not good at this, Alara continued, at being honest about what I want. I've spent so long hiding that I don't know how to not hide anymore. But if we're really doing this, if we're really partners, then I need to be honest about all of it. What do you want? Roman asked quietly. I want the partnership, the real one, not just professional. I want to build something with you that's ours. And I want... She stopped, gathering courage. I want you to look at me the way you looked at me in that club, like I was the most important thing in the room. For a long moment, Roman said nothing. Then he moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Alara, I've been looking at you that way since the Castellano dinner. I just didn't let myself acknowledge it because it complicated everything. Partners don't. It makes the power dynamic messy. It creates vulnerability I don't know how to handle. I know, but maybe that's the point. Maybe being vulnerable is part of the deal. I'm not good at vulnerable. Neither am I. We'll figure it out together. Roman reached up, his hand cupping her face with surprising gentleness. This changes everything. I know. If we do this, if we make it personal, there's no going back to just professional. We succeed together or we fail together. I'm aware of the risks. And you still want this? Yes. Roman kissed her, And it was nothing like Alara expected. Not aggressive or controlling, but careful, almost tentative, like he was discovering something new and wasn't sure of the rules yet. When they pulled apart, Alara was breathless. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we rebuild. Together. We take what Mitchell and Park compromised, and we build it back better, stronger, with people we actually trust. That's a small circle. Quality over quantity." Roman smiled, and it was genuine. "Besides, we don't need an army. We just need to be smarter than everyone else. And we are. Yes, we are." The next 3 months were a blur of reconstruction and consolidation. Roman and Alara worked side by side, literally. She moved into an office adjacent to his, the glass walls between them a reminder that they operated as equals now. They rebuilt the organization from the ground up, cutting loose anyone whose loyalty was questionable, promoting people who'd proven themselves trustworthy. It was brutal and efficient, and it worked. The Zakharovs pulled out of the city entirely after Volkov was arrested. Mitchell and Park disappeared completely. Rumor had it they were somewhere in South America, living off whatever money they'd managed to save. Garrett was released after 2 weeks in the holding room, broken and cooperative. Roman let him go with a simple message. If he ever spoke about what he knew, there would be consequences. Garrett disappeared into obscurity. And through it all, Alara and Roman built something new. Not just an organization, but a genuine partnership that blurred the lines between professional and personal until the distinction stopped mattering. 6 months after the Castellano dinner, they stood in front of the city council, presenting a proposal for a foundation focused on urban development and economic opportunity. It was legitimate, clean, a way to transition resources from the gray areas into something sustainable. The council approved it unanimously. Afterward, in the car, Roman looked at Alara. "Who would have thought? 6 months ago you were invisible. Now you're testifying in front of the city council. 6 months ago you were a criminal empire. Now you're a philanthropist. I'm both, that's the point." Fair enough. They'd learned to navigate the complexity together, the legitimate business, the less legitimate operations that still existed, the constant balancing act between power and responsibility. It wasn't clean, it wasn't simple, but it was theirs. 1 year after everything changed, Alara stood in front of the mirror in Roman's apartment, their apartment now, getting ready for the foundation's first major fundraiser. The midnight blue dress hung in the closet, a reminder of how far she'd come. But tonight she chose something different, red, bold, impossible to ignore. Roman came up behind her, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. "You look dangerous." "Good. That's the idea." He wrapped his arms around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Any regrets? About giving up invisibility?" Alara thought about it, really thought. No. Invisibility was safe, but it was also lonely. This being seen, being known, it's harder, but it's better. Even with all the complications, especially with the complications, they prove it's real. The fundraiser was a success. They raised $2 million for the foundation, made connections with politicians and business leaders, built bridges between their world and the legitimate one. And through it all, Alara stood beside Roman, not behind him, not in his shadow, but beside him, equal, visible, powerful. At the end of the night, as they stood on the balcony of the venue looking out at the city, Roman took her hand. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Okay. When I first asked you to that dinner, if you'd known it would lead to all this, would you still have said yes?" Alara considered. The danger, the exposure, the complete upheaval of the quiet life she'd built. Against that, the partnership, the purpose, the relationship that had grown from professional respect into something deeper. "Yes," she said, without question. "Why?" "Because staying invisible meant staying small, and I was never meant to be small. I just needed someone to see that. I see you now. I know, and I see you too. The real you, not just the empire you built. The man who makes terrible coffee at 2 a.m. and reads philosophy when he can't sleep. The one who risks everything to protect the people he cares about." Roman pulled her closer. "We're not perfect." "No, but we're honest. That counts for something. It counts for everything." The city glittered below them, full of possibility and danger and opportunity. Somewhere in that sprawl, there were people plotting, scheming, building empires of their own. Let them try. Alara and Roman had something those people didn't, a partnership built on truth instead of fear, on mutual respect instead of control. "What's next?" Alara asked. "Whatever we want. We built this together. We get to decide what comes next." Together. Always. 2 years later, the foundation had expanded into 3 cities. Roman's organization had transitioned almost entirely into legitimate operations, with only a few carefully managed exceptions. And Alara had become a recognized figure in both business and philanthropy circles, no longer invisible, no longer dismissed. People asked how she'd done it, how she'd gone from secretary to partner to power broker in less than 3 years. She never told them the truth, that she'd been powerful all along, just hidden, that invisibility had been a strategy, not a limitation, that the real transformation wasn't her gaining power, but rather her choosing to make that power visible. Some lessons couldn't be taught, they had to be lived. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Alara sat at her desk, the real one now, in an office that matched Roman's, and pulled up her intelligence network. She still maintained it, still collected information, still mapped connections and vulnerabilities. But now it served a different purpose. Not survival, but strategy. Not fear, but choice. Her phone buzzed. A text from Roman, who was in a meeting 3 floors down. "Dinner tonight? Just us. No work talk." She smiled and typed back, "You know we're terrible at no work talk. We can try." "Okay. 7 p.m. I'll cook. You don't cook. I'll order from the place you like and pretend I cooked." "Perfect. That's why we work." Alara set down her phone and looked out the window at the city below. 3 years ago, Pashid sat at a desk outside this office, invisible and overlooked. She'd built an empire in the shadows, convinced that power required hiding. She'd been wrong. Real power, the kind that lasted, that mattered, required exactly the opposite. It required being seen, being known, being willing to stand in the light and say, "This is who I am, this is what I've built, and I'm not apologizing for it." It required vulnerability and strength in equal measure. It required partnership with someone who understood that power wasn't about control, but about mutual respect and shared purpose. And it required choosing every single day to be visible even when invisibility would be safer. Alara had made that choice, and she'd make it again, every time. Because she'd learned something in those 3 years that no amount of hidden intelligence could have taught her. The most dangerous thing wasn't being seen. It was staying hidden so long that you forgot you were capable of being more. She'd spent years being invisible by design. Now she was visible by choice, and that made all the difference.